Well, this is entirely unexpected. According to my research, there shouldn't be any water out here. Or at least there wasn't any back in the day when the town site was built here. In fact, when people lived out here, they had to truck water in. Hey sightseers, Sightseeing Sally here. I'm with Marty. He's coming down the road. You can see him in the distance there. And today we're checking out the remnants of an old mining town in Utah. Let's find out what meandering Marty's got. Looks like he found something interesting. What is it?
Piece of purple glass. Must have went through a fire or something.
Why do you say that?
No, it doesn't look like it was the shape of anything. It looks like it was melted or something.
At one time there was 6,000 people living here. This would have been back during the old boom days of the silver mining and gold mining. Thus, everything that's here is pretty spread out. We're going to do our best to show you around Frisco so you can see what's left of this old town.
Buffalo chip.
If you ever wondered why I make Marty wash his hands, that's one reason. Though, I have to say that the old buffalo chip has its uses because back in the day the cowboys used it for making fires. And Marty calls it cowboy firewood because of that. Now, as we're making our way over closer to those ruins, I would just want to point out something that Marty had spotted earlier, and that is an old gas tank that's laying there rusting in the desert sun. If you pay close attention as you're walking through, besides trying to avoid stepping on sheep dung, you'll find that there are quite a bit of old artifacts just laying out here, like this glass and porcelain. I think this is porcelain. Yeah, that could have been from a plate or a cup maybe. Look, here's a pretty big chunk, thick chunk of brown glass. It looks like it was maybe from a bottle. Not sure of the type. And then you've got another thick piece here. Maybe it was a part of this. Maybe not. Oh look, we're coming up on one of those. I'm sorry, my hat is shading it. A piece of cowboy firewood. There's another one right up here. There you go. That's what the cowboys used to start fires out here in the desert. And the benefit to that, you can always be assured you'd have a fire because there was never a shortage of buffalo chips or cow chips even. Now here's an interesting relic just sitting here on the desert floor. An old piece of iron piping. It's like the corner piece. I'm not sure what they call that specifically in plumbing terms, but it's heavy. Yes, I know it has some dirt caked up in it, but it does feel pretty heavy. There are some larger pieces of old machinery out here. We'll get to them shortly. First, however, I want to show you this. These stone ruins and foundations of some of the old buildings from Frisco. This one here, Mother Nature has had its way, toppling down all the stones. It's just the very bottom foundation. And then you've got this one over here. Not really sure if this is more of the commercial district or where people lived, but based on this one, I'm thinking more of a commercial area in town. As I said, there was once 6,000 people living here. This, by the way, was one of, if not the wildest town in the West. It had over 23 saloons, gambling dens, and then of course the old brothels that lined the streets, its commercial district, with those ladies of the night. Tempting. Probably not too hard though. Tempting those miners with illegal activities. In fact, Frisco was so wild, it is said that 50 people per day lost their lives in barroom brawls and other gunslinging activities. It was so wild and crazy here that its seedy reputation surpassed all other cities. It was described as being a cross between Dodge City, Tombstone, and the biblical cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. I could go on, but I think you get the picture. This place was not a good place to be raising a family by any means. Right here, you can see the remains of another foundation. This looks like this here was the building itself, because if you look, you got rocks that have been tumbled down here, but then you've got the remains of a wall here. And then right next door is another here. So I'm thinking that this was a series of buildings here in town, likely commercial buildings. For all I know, I could be standing in the very spot where one of those infamous barroom brawls took place, or maybe even in one of those brothels where... Okay, we'll just leave it at that. Moving on. Over here are the ruins of probably one of the more interesting buildings in town. You can see at one time it was made of these rather large stones here. They kind of have a purplish pinkish hue, and they remind me of the rhyolite that we saw. Oh, I think that was in Oregon Pipe, where we saw rhyolite by one of the old stone cabins. And if I remember correctly, when we were down in Missouri exploring some of those old mills, there was one river in particular where you could walk out onto rhyolite. It was part of the geological formation of the stream bed, where there was a bunch of rhyolite just sitting there, and you could walk on it. Anyways, I digress. All I just wanted to say was the rocks have a purplish hint to it. I don't know exactly what it is. Even though I like to play rock hound, I don't know my minerals and stones very well. But the other interesting feature of this building is right there. It kind of looks like a stone closet. It does have wood on it. It's got the wood frame, and then it's got the wood up above. And it actually has like a little opening there. And if you look inside, you'll see that it was framed out in wood, and then it had like a metal liner added over it. Maybe this was some sort of cold storage unit. I don't know. You tell me. Alright, sightseers, these ruins are so fascinating, I thought I'd show you from a different angle. Here you can see a foundation that had been laid in at some point. Perhaps it was like an outdoor curbing. Maybe not. And then you can see the desert is slowly taking over, growing plants and brush and other, desert flora, fauna. Down over here, you've got this opening that kind of just looks like it was built in to go underground. And then oddly, you've got this pipe, this 90-degree pipe sticking up out of the ground. And then there's this here. Looking at it from the top, you can see it's separated into two sections. And it looks like it's made out of some sort of conglomerate, of stones and like an early form of concrete. I'm just puzzled over what that possibly could have been. And then there's more of that purple stone. It looks like it's been cut specifically. It's just that over time, Mother Nature, it's just kind of cracked and crumbled. But to me, it looks like it had been cut specifically and were large stones put in place as part of the building. Unfortunately, in the research that I did, I wasn't able to find like a town map or a town site map showing what it used to look like or where any of the buildings were compared to what is here today. Let's move on. There's some other things I want to show you, including something that's actually on the National Register of Historic Places. Yep, there is something out here that has made that distinguished list. While I wait for Marty to join me, I just want to point out a few more things. There are the ruins where we're just at. There's a road that cuts through here. And then here are a few more old foundations that are laying here, including one back over there. The elements have definitely taken their toll on Frisco. Well, I can see Marty's catched up to me. He's having a little bit more trouble than I am, though we both are agonizing over the increase in altitude. He's affected by it a lot more than I am. You can see he's standing over by an old piece of machinery that's been left behind. Let's go talk to him and find out exactly what it is.
This is some type of old sifter here, I believe. That big wheel here would turn, or the geared wheel here would turn, and these were hooked up. It would move like these ladder looking things left to right, and it must have ground down whatever they were running through it. And I assume from looking at it, it sat on top of this piece here, and it went down and got flushed through this. It was probably part of the processing, probably part of, you know, the extraction of whatever mineral they were after, gold, silver, whatever it was here.
From what I understand, from what I read on it, silver was the main ore that they extracted here, although I believe they may have also extracted some gold, maybe copper, zinc, I don't know.
Well, it's definitely for extracting something, so, I mean, them are obviously for either grinding down something or like moving it through a screen, you know, to smaller pieces so they could process it. So, some mineral, whatever they were doing. Silver makes sense.
We're gonna make our way over to another piece of equipment. As we are going through though, I wanna point out a few things that you can see just laying here on the ground. You've got the old piping that they probably put water through. Now, I think I mentioned this earlier, they had to truck water in here. There was no natural source of water here in Frisco back when the town was alive and thriving. It looks like Marty also has discovered something of interest. Let's go over there and see what it is. I know we're going a little off tangent here, but sometimes you got to do that when you're out here. Well, Marty, what did you discover over here?
An old conveyor. Used to have wheels like this on both sides, and then the belt would lay across here. I mean, when these seize up like this one, the belt ran across this so long that it wore through this 1/4 inch thick steel and wore a hole right through it, and that was seized up. It's a lot of miles to do that with a cloth belt or a rubber belt.
Allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly. Marty don't know what he's talking about.
Marty always knows what he's talking about. I'm just trying to be funny. It probably didn't work so well.
Anyways, they probably had quite a few of these around, and he's got some really nice angle iron on the sides of it, or U-channel. I'm sure a lot of it was taken over the years, unfortunately, but I can see why. I mean, it's quite valuable metal laying here. I'm surprised this one is still here.
One thing that we want to mention, sightseers, besides the fact that you have to watch where you step, because not only could there be rattlesnakes, sheep dung, cattle dung, whatever, there's also the chance of, you know, stumbling into an old mine. But there's one other reason that Marty's going to explain here about why you really need to be careful when you're out exploring these types of sites. Besides the obvious of rattlesnakes, if you look over here, see that discolored hill? You don't know what they were using to process. That I believe is tailings from mining, and you don't know what they were using to process it, but I know in some processing they use cyanide. Well, the thing about cyanide is you don't really get to tell anybody when you get exposed to it. I used to work with it, and the one thing they said about cyanide is if you taste almonds, you're dead. Did you get that, sightseers? Now that's a pretty grim thought, but as Marty indicated, when you're tasting almonds, it's too late. And since we don't get any do-overs, you definitely want to take precautions. Moving along, you can see up over here by where Marty is standing, remnants of an old building. That would be this metal here. And then what he believes is remnants from an old blower housing that would have, ventilated the mine. See? Metal here from an old building, metal there from the old blower housing. And then up where Marty is standing, we have an old boiler.
Apparently at one time they must have used this to, I assume, heat up water, turn a steam engine to turn a generator to power stuff. Whatever they did here, the burner must have been on this end because the blower's over here. They might have sprayed fuel oil through it, and that's what they used for heating it up. Sprayed through a jet through here. That fan blower, what's left of it, would force the air through it. This might have been the solenoid valve that let the fuel oil through to spray in it. But it's kind of neat old stuff here.
Right up your alley.
Yep. A little bit of duct tape and a welder and it'd be working again. You can see the old gauge that used to be up here too, the old pressure gauge. Fortunately somebody shot a hole in it, but you don't see gauges ain't that big anymore. That's pretty big. And the third deadliest thing in the desert you got to watch out for is, that's asbestos. I can see the fibers in it. This refractory rock might be so old that there's nothing in it, but you can see that whatever they were sealing it with is kind of like a compressed fiberglass, but that's asbestos. I'm positive of that.
There you go, sightseers. You got 2 lessons today, one on cyanide and one on asbestos. While Marty heads back down to the truck to rest himself, I'm going to move on. Up over yonder is where we'll find that historic point of interest that's on the National Register of Historic Places, which I'm going to head to in a moment. First, I want to check something else out that caught my eye. And that's the thing, when you're out here and you're looking around, you're kind of going off of the things that your eye catches, and there are a lot of things that go unseen because, with the different items that the desert has grown up all around the site, you don't necessarily catch it unless you catch a glint off the sun. Or in my case, you catch movement on the corner of your eye from a little chipmunk that's running around behind a bush, which then leads you to look up, and then you see some rock formation over there that looks interesting, which is where I'm headed to next. Right after I catch my breath. Another buffalo chip. No sight of that chipmunk that I had seen. I think it ran off when it saw me coming, or heard me coming. Well, that is what I had seen from down below. That looks man-made. That definitely does not look like it was a force of nature that put that there. I'm going to try climbing up around this way because I think it'll put me at a point where I'll have a better view of the landscape. I'm seeing some things off in the distance that look interesting. Well, here we are, and immediately I get distracted by the bird in the tree. I'm pretty sure I saw a bluebird flying off. But beyond that, you can see the town site where we're just at, where the ruins are. And then, oh, look, down over there. That was a spot I was going to show you, but I got so excited because we saw all them hulking pieces of equipment down over there that I blew right past it. And then, of course, you've got the grandeur of the mountains in the background. Beautiful scenery up here. Over there, alongside that mountain, you can see where they were doing some of the mining. And then, back over here, off in the distance, you can see where that historical point of interest is that we're going to head to next. And then, you've got this. What I came up here to see, what I thought might be so super interesting, turns out it's just a pile of tailings. Wah, 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 wah. Well, that's okay. The exercise was worth it, and so was the view. Man, that is such a beautiful view out there. Let's move on. I'm seeing a lot of them red, fiery red ants that I don't want to hang out here too long before they find me and climb down in my boots and start stinging me. We're going to move over to those kilns next. Now I know some of you are probably wondering what happened to Frisco, and the answer is that back when they were mining, they weren't doing like kind of more of the traditional mines where, you know, you bore your way into a mountain. They were doing more like an open pit type concept, and not quite like the open pits of today where they do the concentric, I think that's correct, the circles around like a football stadium. No, this was more, I want to say kind of a, if I'm understanding correctly, it was more like a funnel shaped, and I don't know for sure if the funnel was inverted so that it was wider. I'm assuming it got wider as you got closer to the bottom. But in any case, it was like this open pit concept, and the mine ended up, the one that they were digging in, ended up collapsing in on itself. When that mine collapsed, that kind of just put up to all the mining that was being done out here. Now, probably at that point, they had extracted, if I recall correctly, $60 million worth of ore. And given that at that point in time, many of the people associated with mining were opportunists, they just left. They didn't stick around, they just packed up their things and headed out of town. And if I understood correctly, the Mormons also tried establishing a ward here. I don't know exactly where that fits in the timeline. I just know that I had read that they had tried to put in a ward. And if you don't know anything about Mormon religion, that's okay, neither do I. But I think it's kind of equivalent to like the Catholic Church where they have like the diocese set up. I think that might be how it kind of is with the Mormon religion. If not, I know some of you will correct me in the comments, and that's perfectly fine. I accept full responsibility for not knowing that exactly. In any case, the town did not survive. I suspect not having a source of water out here also played a factor in it, because again, as I said, they had a truck in the water. There wasn't a natural spring, even though we saw evidence of something like that here. It's possible that for whatever reason they weren't able to access that spring back then, or maybe that's just a spot where moisture collects these days. I'm going to stop here for a second to catch my breath and to point out that over here out of the side of the hill you can see a rather interesting structure. It appears to be made out of wood. Yep, definitely wood. And then you can see there are two openings that from here appear to go in rather far. My parents didn't raise no dummy. I am not going to stick my hand in there, nor am I going to stick my face up close to it, because today it is really cool outside, so I imagine there might be some kind of critters holed up in there trying to stay warm. And even if that's not the case, I'm not going to be the one to find out. Besides, we are now at the point where I can show you the beehive kilns that are here that are on the National Register of Historic Places. You can see there are 4 of them, 2 of which the tops have deteriorated over time. Personally, I've only seen 2 other examples of beehive kilns still standing, and that would be 1 in Death Valley and 2 up in northern Michigan, in Upper Michigan, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, over at that ghost town of Fayette. For those who don't know, the beehive kilns would have been used to create charcoal or creosote, which were then used in the mining process as a fuel source, so that they could heat up whatever they needed to heat up during the processing of the ore. At least That's what I think. It's been a while since I last studied up on the use of a beehive kiln. They do have these fenced off. I know the fence here is laying on the ground, but I'm not going to walk over it and go in because obviously they don't want people tramping in there, most likely because they've got the two that are already deteriorated, and then, you know, you've got the old vandals that like to hasten that along. I'll pop up on the screen an example from when we were in Death Valley. That way you can see what the inside of a beehive kiln looks like. Or, when you're done watching this video, you can go check out the video that I did in Death Valley. If I remember, I will link it down below. You can see if you go up towards the beehive kilns from the left instead of the direction that I came from, which was over there, that there's this crumbling down structure. This appears to be something that was probably more related to the refining of whatever it was that they were mining here, because if you look, you can see some metal here that was likely used in that process, along with a wooden ledge up there that whatever was there is no longer existing. There's actually some metal rods that are sticking up on the ground that have like that, almost like the head of a screw where you would screw something onto the top of that. And it's all lined up going in this direction here. Given my limited knowledge on all things mechanical, I'm just going to leave it at that and move on, because there is a cemetery here we want to check out. Plus, yep, there's a plus. We may even be able to see some of the old miner shacks closer to the mine.